Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining today. It's always exciting to do a presentation that has summer in the title. I'm sure none of us can believe that it's already that time to start talking about solutions for the summer, but that is what we're going to be covering today. And first, we're going to provide a very, very brief overview of Read Live and the Read Naturally strategy. Then I'm going to talk about 1 Minute Reader Live, an overview of that program, the levels that are in there, a comparison between 1 Minute Reader Live and Read Naturally Live. And then for most of, and maybe at least half, will be in a demonstration mode where I'll log in as a staff member, show you some of the back end things that need to be done in order for your students to utilize 1 Minute Reader. And then I'll show you what the students experience from the student side as well. We'll wrap up with providing you with resources, some documentation that is helpful in communicating with parents for the summer for this program. And of course, you have your Q&A panel. And if there's time at the end, we'll answer questions as well. So as you probably all know, Read Live is an online suite of programs that contains Read Naturally Live, Word Warm-Ups Live, 1 Minute Reader Live, and Read Naturally Live Espanol. All 4 of these programs are available within a subscription of Read Live. All of them are interventions with the exception of 1 Minute Reader. Okay, 1 Minute Reader is the only independent program that is available in there. Read Naturally Live goes from 1st through 8th grade reading level. It's an intervention where a teacher is always going to be needed at certain points to assist the student. Word Warm-Ups Live, also an intervention. It's a phonics and decoding program where students can work in 3 levels, 1 syllable, 2 syllable, and a multisyllabic level. 1 Minute Reader Live, that independent program we're going to talk about today, the students can work completely independently. Okay, that's why it's perfect for summer. There's other good opportunities to use it too that we'll talk about briefly. And then we do have a program for teaching students to read in Spanish and Read Naturally Live Espanol. But again, today what we're talking about is 1 Minute Reader Live. More than 1 in 3 students from kindergarten through 3rd grade need intensive reading intervention. And this is a huge number, intensive reading intervention. And it's a number that we all know increased during the pandemic. We know that in some high poverty schools, as many as 60% of the students have been identified as at high risk of reading issues. And again, these numbers have increased in the last few years. Students who are not proficient readers by 3rd grade are 4 times less likely to graduate high school. So we have this huge increase in the number of students who are struggling readers, and we know that the end outcome of that can be very detrimental to our students. And so we have a very, very big problem. And 1 Minute Reader is a good solution for that, because what we know more than anything is that students need the opportunity to practice reading. More than just the opportunity, they need a structured environment in order to do that. And 1 Minute Reader is a research-based program that provides that structure, but it allows independent reading because teachers aren't in the homes during the summer. And they also, even if during the school year, students can't always have the support of a teacher, but there are times where they can work on their reading. So 1 Minute Reader Live is great anytime there is not direct teacher involvement available. It is a highly effective instruction. It uses the Read Naturally strategy, and it's going to provide improvement in fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. So when I say that it uses the Read Naturally strategy, what I mean is that we combine 3 research-based strategies into one for all 4 of the programs that are in Read Live. There's teacher modeling, repeated reading, and progress monitoring. So in 1 Minute Reader, students read along with the audio support. It's recorded slow enough that they can actively read along. So when there's nobody there to give them how to read a word properly, it is read for them during the read along. And they are able to learn new words and solidify high frequency words during that teacher modeling. Repeated reading is what the National Panel of Reading said is the best way to get better at reading. We all know that. If you want to get better at anything, you do it over and over again. And so the students bring these passages to mastery. And the reason we want them to bring it to mastery is because we want them to be able to read better tomorrow, right? We want the words that they bring to mastery today for them to still have them in their word bank tomorrow when they read something different. And so that repetition is what allows that, is where that is allowed to happen. And then finally, the progress monitoring. It's the hook, it's the fun part. It provides nice reports for teachers and parents. But from a student perspective, it's what makes them want to do it because they get immediate feedback that they're making progress. In just 1 minute's time, they see a visual image of themselves getting better. And so that is the biggest thing we have to overcome for some of our students, right? Is getting them to buy in. And that progress monitoring is what does that. So the benefits for 1 Minute Reader are really for any student who needs a little more structure during their independent reading time. Everything is nonfiction, which is motivating because it's not belittling content if you're reading below grade level, and it's engaging and interesting. Students who are working and Read Naturally Live during the school year can use 1 Minute Reader Live as homework. They can use it during independent reading time. They can use it in the summer. And then students who are about to graduate from Read Naturally Live, if you have students who are in the intervention this spring and you think, gosh, I really don't think they're going to need an intervention next when they come back in the fall, you're going to ensure that more if they use 1 Minute Reader Live over the summer and keep them reading. They have to keep reading. So summer break is what we're primarily talking about today. The resources I'm going to provide allow for communication between you and the parents for that kind of a system. And it will provide that structured practice over summer break. We also have a great article that I'm going to direct you to that provides you with ideas for incentive programs, that so when they come back in the fall, they can collect some rewards for doing the work that is needed with 1 Minute Reader. But it is important to remember that this resource is available to you all school year. So you will get more out of your intervention if kids read even in other times of the day, right? Rather than just reading intervention time, if you can get them to read during independent reading time as homework after the school year over holiday breaks, they're going to get even more out of Read Live. What's included in 1 Minute Reader Live, we have 6 levels. It starts in early first grade and goes through mid 5th grade reading level. In each of the levels, there's 8 books. And the way we do it in 1 Minute Reader Live is we group them by theme. So each book has 5 different stories that have a common theme. So there might be one about athletes or about disasters, natural disasters, or animals, something like that. There's interactive vocabulary, so students can get work on their vocabulary. We have a quick quiz where they answer multiple choice questions and one open-ended questions. And it is a little bit more fun and gamified than Read Naturally Live. Students earn points for everything they do within 1 Minute Reader Live. And so it is a little bit more fun for that independent time. Here you can see that list of our levels. E stands for early first grade. But the rest of the levels are named for the midway point of the grade that they're named for. So level 2 is mid 2nd grade. Level 3 is mid 3rd grade, and so forth. Oftentimes people will ask me, well, what are the primary differences between Read Naturally Live and 1 Minute Reader Live? A little history lesson in Read Naturally. 1 Minute Reader Live was created because teachers wanted something to suggest for parents to do at home. That's why we created it, and we based it on the same strategy that was working for these teachers in their classrooms. So Read Naturally Live can be used with any student who needs reading intervention and has a teacher around to help them during intervention time. 1 Minute Reader can still be used with kids who need intervention, but during times where they don't have that help from the teacher. Read Naturally Live goes from 1st all the way through 8th grade. And as it sits now, 1 Minute Reader just goes through mid 5th. Also, Read Naturally Live does have some phonics series and idioms work that 1 Minute Reader Live does not have. So instead, we organize by theme and topic. And in Read Naturally Live, we do have different series that have slightly different emphases, whether it be phonics, or vocabulary. The biggest difference, though, is that Read Naturally Live requires the help from a teacher. 1 Minute Reader Live does not. Both create lovely reports that you'll get to see at the end of it once I go through the demonstration portion of this presentation. In your handout, you have two little takeaway documents. One of them is a little checklist. I'm a checklist person, and so this is the kind of thing that I love. I want something, a list of things I need to do, and then I can check them off. Sometimes I'll even add things that I have already done to my list so that I can check them off. So this is a resource in your handout to make sure that your students have a license in Read Live. If they don't, you can add them and give them a license, get them placed if they need to be licensed, and then they need to be taught how to do the steps. So I will show you those things so that you are comfortable doing all of them. There's also in your handout a steps poster, if you will. So it shows the steps that students go through when they're working in 1 Minute Reader Live. And we are going to do that right now. So I'm actually going to leave this PowerPoint and I'm going to go into a Read Live account. I'm going to start by logging in as a teacher because I want to show you some of those back-end things that need to happen in order for a student to have access and work in 1 Minute Reader Live. So when I go to the homepage, most of you, I suspect, have Read Live accounts, and this is something that looks familiar to you. If you have decided to utilize this with students, some of who do not have a Read Naturally Live intervention access, first thing you probably want to do is make sure the student's in the account. So if you go under Student Setup, you can click on any of these headers to sort and filter. So let's say I have a student named Anna, and I want to see, is Anna in the account? I click the horizontal lines, enter Anna's name, and click Apply. Nope, Anna's not in here. Okay, so when I click Reset, all the students who are in here will be added. But if I want to add Anna, she didn't use it during the intervention time, so she's not in here with a license, but she's going to use it over the summer. And so I'm going to add her as a student by simply clicking the Add Student button, and then I will fill in all of these fields. When you decide to give Anna a license, you will select Yes. And by default, she will have access to Read Naturally Live and 1 Minute Reader Live. Okay. You can, if you just want her to have access to the independent program, you can deselect Read Naturally Live, and then the only program she will be able to utilize is 1 Minute Reader Live. If she comes back in the fall and is a student who will be in the intervention, you will need to grant her access to Read Naturally Live again. So it's up to you on whether or not you want to remove access to that. When the students get to a point in Read Naturally Live where they need a teacher, they are stuck. So they can't really mess with their student account in the intervention, because they'll get to that first cold timing and the teacher needs to log in, and they're stuck there. They will tire of their vocabulary game, and then they'll go into 1 Minute Reader. So there isn't too big of a risk from just allowing them to continue to have access to that. Okay. Now, if your student is in there, you need to make sure that the student has access to 1 Minute Reader Live. Okay, so then you're going to find the tile that's marked 1 Minute Reader Live. My little hand here is circling it. It's in the kind of middle to the right side of your screen. When I click on 1 Minute Reader Live, I want you to take your eyes across the heading row of the table. And very far to the right, there's a column titled OMR Access. If the word yes is in the OMR Access column, that means the student has access to 1 Minute Reader Live. If you click on OMR Access one time, it will sort your students and it will provide you with all the students who do not have access first. So if you want to give all these students access, you select the box next to the first student. While holding your Shift key down, you'll select the box next to the final student and it will select all of them. So you can certainly select one at a time, or you can select all of them. And then you will say, Add OMR Access. Okay. And now this student will get access to 1 Minute Reader Live. Okay, and he'll be in this group down here with the yes column. The other thing I want to show you in here has to do with the different story options that are available within 1 Minute Reader Live. If you take a note of the only button that is blue in the upper left-hand corner of this page, it's called Change Story Options for Selected. Those of you who use Read Naturally Live, that's probably familiar to you. So if you click on that button, as you might expect, it provides you with the opportunity to adjust what is required of each student. The default options are that students have to read along 1 time and they have to practice at least 2 times. If this is a mainstream student, that's probably appropriate. If this is an intervention student, you may decide, I want this student to read along twice, and I want them to have to practice at least 3 times or practice at least 4 times. So you can adjust this to be more appropriate for each individual student. You absolutely can leave it as is and just let them go. And that's a lot less work for you right now. And I'm sure you've got a big to-do list already. But if you do want to tailor it, make some changes for mainstream students and different changes for intervention kids, you can certainly do that. You can also turn off levels that you know are going to be way too hard or way too easy for the student. Okay. Students can place themselves into 1 Minute Reader Live. But it is not with voice recognition. And so it is based on what they think is the right spot. So if you leave all the levels on, they will be able to navigate between all the levels, which is usually fine, because the truth is they don't want to read something that's way too easy and they don't want to read something that's way too hard. So they end up landing in the right spot if you do nothing. So if you are unable to turn off the levels that are inappropriate for the students, that's just fine. They will end up in the right spot. Okay. The resources I'm going to direct you to at the end also have a place where you can write the level that you think the student should use, so that at least the parent is aware, hey, the student probably should work in level 3, and that might get you some support on that end as well. So I will close out of there. And now what I'm going to do is go over to the student side. And I am going to log in as a student. Now, this student has never used Read Naturally Live before, so they are able to go in there and conduct their own placement. Once they do that, they get to the cold timing step, they'll be stuck. Okay, so I allowed this student to have access to Read Naturally Live, but if you choose to not do that, you can deselect it and then they will not be able to go in there. They will only be allowed to go into 1 Minute Reader Live. The first time they log in, they are asked to take a placement test. Okay, they can choose yes or no. If they choose yes, it will take them through, it will provide them with a level. They will read the passage and select the word that they read last. So it is not hearing them. It is basing the recommendation off the word the student claims they read last during the timing. Okay. And then the computer will say, yep, this is a good level, or no, it's not. Regardless, all levels that are left on by you are going to be available to the student. Okay. So if the student ends up being very favorable for himself and getting himself in a level that's a little higher than is right for him, he can just go down to the lower level on the next story. So he's not stuck there, so long as those levels are left on by you.
Please select a book.
You can see that here's level E, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so all of these levels have been left on. If the level wasn't left on, then I would not be able to access that level. I am going to have a student pass or go through the steps of one of these stories, but I want you to notice before I do that, that should a student decide they want to take a placement test at any point, they can. More importantly, should a parent decide they want to take their student through placement, at any point Student can go through that. So just because they don't do it the very first time they log in doesn't mean the parent can't say, hey, wait a minute, let's see what's going to be the right spot and oversee that placement. Okay.
Please select a story.
So the student can pick whatever book and whatever story within that book that they want to read.
Click Start Timing and begin reading. Click on the words you don't know to hear them read to you. Click Finished if you finish reading before the bell sounds.
Notice students start on cold read. The teacher is not needed to be with them. They can do it on their own. They click Start Timing and they read out loud. Okay. You need to let parents know that the students should be reading out loud. You should hear them working in 1 Minute Reader. It should be whisper reading. Students can click on any word they're unsure of.
Greatness. Athletes.
And get that support that they need. So when they're by themselves and they come to a word, certainly proper nouns, they tend to be very willing to click on and have those words read to them. But this cold read is based on what the student claims are the words they didn't know, and what the student claims is their last word read. So even if the student is trying to be as honest and accurate as possible, it's not going to be accurate. You're not with the student. The parent's not with the student. So it is not a very solid assessment data point, right? Because it's student driven. But it is a good baseline for progress monitoring for the student because they see where they start.
Click on the last word you read when the bell sounded. Click Next to continue.
They see where their cold timing score starts, 53. And then as they work through the rest of these steps, they're going to see that score gets higher. So this is just a way to, here's where you're at now. And now as they get higher, it is very motivating for the student. So now after they've done that cold read, they get to see it graphed.
Look at how many words per minute you read.
There is not a specific goal they need to reach. Okay, it's just based on how many times they read that story. So don't worry about them getting stuck because they can't reach their goal. That does not happen here. Okay, so after they see that graph, that baseline, now they can go on to their read along.
Click the blue words to learn what they mean. Or click Start Read Along and read along as the story is read to you.
So now the student will read along with the audio support. If the student...
Please select a story.
Sorry. If the student has a read along that is required, they will have
Click the blue words to learn what they mean. Or click Start Read Along and read along as the story is read to you.
Now, if the teacher decides that the student should have more than one read along, remember I showed you on the back end how that can be adjusted for the student. So if we find our student's name in here and click Apply, here it is. And we want to say that this student doesn't need to have any read-alongs and only needs one practice. We click Save and Close. Now what you'll see
to continue.
So now it's telling the student that there's no required read-alongs. Notice the student is still allowed to read along. It still appears the student can click Start Read Along. They can read along, and they can read along many times if they want, but they're not required to. Okay, so these story options that are over here in the staff module, they can be adjusted at any time. So if a parent is having problems because a student is stuck on too many read-alongs or too few read-alongs, you can adjust them at any time and have it immediately apply for that student. But if the student has required read-alongs, instead of the star being gray, the star is bolded in blue. So that means that the student needs to complete a read-along in order to be allowed to go on to that next step. I also want you to notice that during this, there are many words that are blue and hyperlinked to definitions. So here is an opportunity for students to get a robust vocabulary lesson. Now, they're not inclined to click on words to hear definitions, except that they do earn points. Okay, so each word they click on, they earn 50 points if they listen to the definition. The incentive program resource I'm going to direct you to at the end does talk about point accumulation. And so if they know ahead of time that how many points they earn matter, then that will be something that will encourage them to click on words they don't know.
Click Start Timing and begin reading. Click Finished if you finish the story before the bell sounds.
So now the student is going to practice on their own. By default, remember, the students have to practice at least twice, but there is no goal they have to meet. They just have to practice twice. I've adjusted it. Remember, I showed you we went back into the staff module and we dropped his read-alongs to 0 and dropped his practices to 1. So I'm only required to practice once. But if you leave the settings as is, they will be required to practice twice. If you are giving this to your intervention kids in elementary school, I suggest most of them probably could use 2 read-alongs and at least 3 practices. Okay, it's up to you and you know your kids better, but that is a basic recommendation that I tend to make. If these are for mainstream students, they maybe don't need any read-alongs or 1 at the most, and maybe 1 or 2 practices is sufficient as well. Okay. As the student practices, each time they practice, the number appears in these bubbles and they earn points for every practice.
Click on the last word you read when the bell sounded. Click Start Timing to see if you can improve your score. Or click Next to save this as your hot timing and continue.
So because I'm only required to read 1, it's going to allow me to go on to the quiz. If I was on the default settings, I would have to practice at least once more, but I can keep practicing if I want to, and many kids do because they love that. I have a question here that is, can you mass mark the number of read-alongs and the number of read-alones? Yes. When I showed you in the staff module before, if you click the top student's name and the bottom student while holding the shift key down, it will highlight everybody. Another way you can do it is, let's say you want this one, and you can click them independently. Then you can come in here and change story options, and you can make adjustments to the read along and read alone in mass. However, you cannot adjust the levels that are available in mass. Okay, only the story options. But if you want to say all my 3rd graders are going to need 2 read alongs and 4 practices, you can find all your 3rd graders and do that. But you do have to turn off levels. If you choose to turn off levels, that does have to be 1 at a time. That's a wonderful question. Thank you for asking it.
Look at how many words per minute you read.
So notice the points you may have seen before. It was at 200, now it's at 700. The student earned 500 points based on how much progress they made over their cold timing. After they get to see this, they love seeing this, you can imagine, then they can do their quick quiz.
Click the best answer for each quiz question. As you answer questions correctly, their letters will fill in the blanks in the joke jumble. Click Show Story to see the story again.
Students can look back. When they come to a word or to a question, if they get the correct answer, the letter fills in. And the question is, why was Cinderella a bad basketball player? Okay, they also get that happy sound, so they know right away if they were right. And they get 1,000 points. So this is how we make it so that students care the most about comprehension. If students rush through the stories and bomb the quizzes, they are not going to earn a lot of points, because you earn the most points for getting a quiz question correct the first time. So that's one of the reasons to tie something to points, because that will help students understand that comprehension is what we care the very most about. If they get a question wrong, they get a different sound, the letter doesn't fill in, and they have to go back. The one they got wrong is not allowed to be picked. So they will eventually, no matter what, get the right answer.
Type your answer, then click Next.
Now, one letter will let them go on in this. So if you have young kids, they can just type in one letter and be allowed to go on. But they can also type complete sentences.
Was your answer correct? Check your answer and click yes or no.
So they can see whether or
Then
not
click next.
they answered it right, and then they can click yes or no. They'll all click yes. Well, not all of them, but almost all of them will decide that they were right.
Look at your results from this story. Click next to continue.
So here we can see they get an idea of how many points they earned in this story. They get an idea of all their scores. When they click next,
Look at your results from this book. Click next to continue.
you can see as they pass more stories in this book, they're going to have more bar graphs. They're going to have more comprehension scores. And these numbers are valuable. The first four, because these are graded by the computer, and it will tell you if there's a specific kind of comprehension issue. This student got inference wrong on the first one. Not worried yet, but if she gets inference wrong on a couple more in this book, that's going to tell me she maybe has an issue with inference. Okay.
Please select a story.
So now she's done with this story. She can read about another athlete. If she's sick of athletes,
Please select a book.
she can come and select a different story from a different book if she chooses to. Okay, so those are the steps. I showed you the reports that come in, the book summary, but we also have a did you know section. If a student passes all the stories in one of the books, they get information, additional information about bugs or about athletes or whatever the theme is, and they can also do a crossword puzzle. And the crossword puzzle is kind of neat. It allows you to see the options when you click on the hint, and then when you it highlights the section that you're going in, and you can just click on the word that is supposed to go into that section. Now, we also have other reports that really are more for teachers, and they're called the Students at a Glance report. And what that does is it provides averages. It tells this teacher what is the average cold timing score on the first 3 stories the student completed in this level. In this case, it's 41. You can see my cursor is circling it. What's the average of the most recent 3 they've completed in this level? 56. So at the start of this level, they were at 41. Now they're at 56. Okay, we can also see how many times they read along. We can see what their final timing score was and what their quiz percentage correct is. So this is a very nice report. It's generated from the staff module rather than the student side. On our website, we have a lot of resources. So if you go to readnaturally.com/read-live-help, we've got student training videos. Notice here, there's a student training video section that's on our help page, and we have a student's guide to 1-minute reader live. That's very helpful for students to watch before they go home for the summer to utilize this program. And sending it to the parents is also helpful. So the parents know what is expected of the students when they're working on this program at home. Okay. So we did cover all the different topics for 1-minute reader live and for how to utilize it this summer. But I do have a few more resources I'm going to share with you before we depart. One of them is the parent letter. And it gives the parent a little bit of information about 1-minute reader live and allows the parent to opt in or opt out of utilizing it. So you can print this off of our website, and a link to it is going to appear right now into the chat box. So feel free to click on that link and you can access that, print it off, and send it home with students. You may also want to send home this parent handout that provides teachers with a lot more information about 1-minute reader. This often goes out to the parents who decide to use it. So when you get those forms back, anybody who said, yes, I want to use it, then you can send them this handout, providing the URL link. Notice there is a section that allows you to tell the parent where you would think the student should start if you wanted to do it that way. And then the parent gets a list of the steps as well. Another thing on our blog is attention parents, tips for boosting literacy over the summer. So if you have a parent who's like, what do I do with my students over the summer? Sending them this is kind of some fun ideas about how to keep it going during the summer months. And then finally, I want to show you this last blog article for when your students come back. If you keep track of how they did by looking at their points, which is going to be in your reports. You don't have to do anything over the summer. At the end of the summer, you can run the reports for your students and get this information. And then you can tie different goals, rewards for your students. So this blog article, which that is also now linked in your chat box, is a great resource for you for coming up with some quick and easy motivation incentive programs for your student to get your students to use this more over the summer. Okay. So thank you all for joining. I really do appreciate everything you do for your struggling readers. I hope you have a restful summer, and I hope you're able to get many of them using this program over the summer. Thank you very much. We do have about 4 minutes left, and I see there's a question in my question and answer panel, so I'll read that and then answer it. I would like to use this with ELLs in middle school. The students' fluency may be higher than their level. However, their comprehension would not be above the level. Is there a way to adjust? So what I would recommend you doing with an English language learner is turning off the levels that you believe are way above them from a comprehension standpoint. So what I think you're saying is if they take them through themselves through that placement process, they're pretty fluent. So they're going to end up, the program's going to recommend a level that's higher than what they can understand. And if that's, whether it's an ELL student or not, if you know that about your student, then I suggest turning off those higher levels because you know, even though they can read them okay, you know that the content's going to be too hard. And then leave the lower levels on that you think are going to be more appropriate for their comprehension. And now I also have one saying, can you show us that link again for the parent page? So if you look in your chat box, I believe that that link will appear in just a minute. It should be. I can show it to you too. I think there's this parent letter. This is the parent permission slip. So I'm not exactly sure which one you meant, but then this is the parent handout that once the parents who are going to use this with their students at home, this is the handout. And so the one that just went in the box right now is you can see in the URL, parent letter permission slip form. The second URL that's in there is this one, this information sheet. Is there an app for this so parents can just put it on their iPad? Yes. We have something, and in here you can find it. We have 1 Minute Reader Live for the home. It's an iPad app. It can only be used on iPad apps. If parents go to oneminutereader.com, they can start a 7-day free trial. If they like it, they can convert it into a paid subscription and use it over the summer. So if you don't want them in your account, but they want to use it, we do have a home version of 1 Minute Reader Live. It's oneminutereader.com. You can send your parents there to sign up for that 7-day trial. If they like it, they can use it all summer. So I have another question. When on Read Naturally, I frequently have to fudge the cold reads. If the cold read fluency is very high on Read Live, ONRL will let the students continue to work. What I think you're asking is that your student is reading so fast that the computer tells you it is not possible. And if that is the case, I'm not positive that's what you're asking, but if that is the case, they are very likely, okay, perfect, thank you, Diane. If that's the case, they are very likely, there's a couple things to consider. They're probably in the wrong level. And now I just talked about English language learners who tend to be more fluent than they are able. Oh, how does it work in 1 Minute Reader Live? It doesn't do that because so 1 Minute Reader Live, okay, I'm back up a little bit. In Read Naturally Live, you get that error message based on the student's story goal. So you can raise the student story goal a little bit, and then you're less likely to get that error message because it's an algorithm based on what their story goal is and what is reasonable based on that story goal. Because there is no story goal in 1 Minute Reader, they will not get that error message. So great question. So that is not going to be trouble for them when they are at home because there's no goal associated with it. Now, if they read 700 words in 3 seconds, then it's going to, but nothing that a human can actually read will appear that way. And again, the main purpose is that kids can do this independently. So they will find that they are never stuck. They're never going to get those error messages because we know there is not a teacher there to solve the problem. And so the whole program is designed to never be hung up on something like that. So thank you for mentioning that. All right, I think that's all the questions I have, and I went over by a minute, so I apologize for anyone I stole an extra minute from. Again, thank you very much. If you have a question before that you think of later, feel free to reach out. There is a brief survey. If you could fill that out, that would be wonderful. And if you have a question, you can certainly put it in there. But we would love your feedback. It helps us know how, what kinds of training opportunities are needed and whether or not we're doing a good job with them. So again, thank you for your time, and hopefully it's sunny and beautiful where you are and you can enjoy the spring and summer weather. Take care, everyone.